Mr. Prime Minister, welcome to Meet the Press. And
thank you.
By the way, not the first Trudeau we've had on Meet the Press. Your
Really?
father was on Meet the Press back in 1977.
A long time ago.
Yes, yes, sir. Let me start. Just earlier this week, the White House, perhaps it was in response to your response to the decision to apply tariffs on aluminum and steel, a very blunt statement that sort of perhaps lumped the tariffs and NAFTA together. And said this: the United States has been taken advantage of for many decades on trade. Those days are over. Earlier today, this message was conveyed to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau of Canada. The United States will agree to a fair deal, or there will be no deal at all. Did you view the NAFTA response as a response to your criticism of the tariffs?
I think our approach has been consistent all the way through, recognizing that Canada and the United States have perhaps the most successful economic partnership and alliance and friendship in the history of the modern world. There are no two countries that are as interconnected, interdependent. You sell more things to us every year than to UK, Japan, and China combined. Our economies are incredibly interwoven, and there is an absolute path towards improving NAFTA and doing well on that. The fact that the president has moved forward with these tariffs is not just going to hurt Canadian jobs, it's going to hurt U.S. jobs as well. And neither of those things is something that Canada wants to see.
Your reaction felt as if you felt jilted, as if you felt like Canada got like, wait a minute, we've done all these things for the United States over the years, and this is how you treat us. It came across as if you felt as if Canada was being taken advantage of.
Obviously, we've watched this president operate and worked with him over the past year, and we know that he prides himself on being unpredictable from time to time. So that's not really the crux of it. One of the things that I have to admit I'm having a lot of trouble getting around is the idea that this entire thing is coming about because the president and the administration have decided that Canadian steel and aluminum is a national security threat to the United States. Now, first of all, the idea that our soldiers who had fought and died together on the beaches of World War II, in the mountains of Afghanistan, and have stood shoulder to shoulder in some of the most difficult places in the world, that are always there for each other, somehow this is insulting to them. The idea that the Canadian steel that's in military vehicles in the United States, the Canadian aluminum that makes your fighter jets, is somehow now a threat. The fact that, next week we're hosting the G7 Summit of World Leaders, and the airfield, the military base that Air Force One's going to land in, was put there in World War II to protect an aluminum smelter that was providing to the military effort. The idea that we are somehow a national security threat to the United States is quite frankly insulting and unacceptable.
So the president's chief economic advisor was asked about this, and he pushed back and he said, look, he was asked about it specifically having to do with the tariffs, as far as the EU's complaints about him. And he said, well, if we can get their help with China, then we can talk. Perhaps this is the same issue. What do you feel as if the president wants from you in putting these tariffs out there?
I don't know.
You don't know what he wants here. You don't know. Is this about a NAFTA decision? You don't have an idea.
The reason I don't know is because he's talked about the fact of this. He's worried about trade surpluses, trade deficits around the world. Well, they have a $2 billion surplus on steel with us. So it's not like the trade is imbalanced against the U.S. favor on this one. And on China, we're very much aligned. We've been taking significant measures against transshipment, against Chinese steel coming into Canada in underhanded ways, because we have the same concerns in our steel foundries that the Americans do. And this is just going in the wrong direction.
You said you're going to retaliate. How serious you are, and do you really think you can make a dent? Look, the American economy is a lot larger than how can you do this retaliation without hurting Canada more than the United States?
Well, we've put forward, first of all, we're putting the same kinds of tariffs exactly on steel and aluminum coming from the United States into Canada to be directly reciprocal. But we're also putting a number of tariffs on consumer goods, finished products, for which Canadians have easy alternatives. One of this, either made in Canada or made from another partner with no tariffs. One of the truths about tariffs is they drive up costs for consumers. And on top of that, these tariffs are going to be hurting American workers and Canadian workers.
Are you concerned about the economic philosophy of the United States is moving in one direction, your economic philosophy is moving in another direction, and right now America's growing. So that means if America grows, Canada loses, and vice versa. Are you concerned if you're not on the same page?
Actually, we've been growing. We had the fastest growth rates in the G7 just last year, so we're doing very well.
Bit of a slowdown, though, a little bit.
Yeah, no, but last year we were doing great, and we're continuing to look good. One of the reasons that I'm excited about this G7 meeting, the meeting of the world's advanced industrial economies next week, is because the primary topic of conversation is going to be how do we make growth that works for our middle classes in our countries, because that's what the president got elected on, that's what I got elected on here, that's what a lot of our other leaders are focused on as well. And that challenge of how to make sure people feel like they're part of the success of our domestic economies is really important. And we've done some very clear things that have helped that, yes, are going in a different direction than the president. We raised taxes on the wealthiest 1%, we lowered them on the middle class. We've been given a really generous child benefits to low and middle income families. And that's creating confidence and optimism that is allowing us to sign more trade deals and create more growth in our country.
Your father said this in 1969. Living next to you, referring to the United States, is in some ways like sleeping with an elephant. No matter how friendly and even-tempered the beast, one is affected by every twitch and grunt. Do you sleep worse these days? Do you sleep unsettled?
You know, I think I've taken a different take on that than my father. I think we're more of a moose. We're still...
You're the moose.
We're the moose.
And what's America?
Oh, you still massively outweigh us.
Okay.
But a moose is you know, even-tempered and you know, strong, but yeah, massively outweighed still. So we're aware that we have to work collectively and collaboratively with the United States, and that, quite frankly, has been my point with the president from the very beginning. I mean, I've had a constructive relationship with him, and will continue to, and I'm standing up clearly for Canadian interests. But as I've said, Canada has a tremendous vested interest in seeing the United States do well, because if we're doing well and you're doing poorly, we're going to be doing poorly too. We're that interconnected. So we want a win-win, and that's what we've been working for.
So President Obama's former chief economic advisor, Austin Goolsbee, said one of his fears, and he said one of the things that's probable is that China might go to Canada, the EU, yourself, and essentially go to the WTO and lodge a complaint and an investigation into U.S. trade practices. Is that something you would think about doing?
Oh, we're already looking. We don't need China for that. We're already going to be lodging complaints and are lodging complaints against these trade practices, which, quite frankly, again, having to have the United States make the argument that somehow Canada is a national security threat to the United States simply doesn't hold water.
Let me go to NAFTA. Do you understand what the United States wants in this renegotiation?
I think they want a better deal on their auto sector from Mexico, and I think they want more access on certain agricultural products like dairy to Canada.
Are you willing to give them that?
We were moving towards you know, flexibility in those areas that I thought was very, very promising. But the United States want a sunset clause in NAFTA, which makes no sense. You don't sign a trade deal that automatically expires every 5 years.
That's a non-starter for you.
It's a non-starter. Well,
You won't be at the table if that's on the table?
No. You can think about investment. What company is going to want to invest in Canada if 5 years later there might not be a trade deal with the United States? And that, quite frankly, is probably part of the whole point of the United States, to say, well, no, we don't want anyone investing in our NAFTA partners. We want people investing in us. But that's not the way trade works. And quite frankly, having, for example, an auto sector that spans from southern Ontario into Michigan has been really an advantage for the North American auto sector to be able to have complementarity here.
This week, the president is a bit of, some would argue he's rolling out the red carpet for some of these North Korean leaders. But he's certainly paying a lot of respect to the North Korean leaders as he does at the summit. Do you look at that as an American ally and think is he treating North Korea better than he's treating us?
No, I think we're very pleased with what the United States is doing on North Korea. It's an area of concern not just to the region, to us as a Pacific nation, to the world.
No, but I'm talking about in this
anything we can
relationship with Canada. Do you feel as if the president is tougher on the bilateral relationship with Canada right now than he is on North Korea?
I don't see the comparison because for me, the threat that is represented by North Korea is a real national security threat. We can all agree on that, and we need to work together. And Canada was happy to host a meeting in Vancouver exactly to address this. And we completely and fully support any actions that are going to de-escalate the peninsula.
You, I'm sure, probably read with amusement that at a fundraiser, President Trump bragged about a back and forth he had with you. Let me quote him. He says, Trudeau came to see me. He said, no, we have no trade deficit with you. We have none. Donald, please. I said, wrong, Justin, you do. And then he admits, I didn't even know. I had no idea. I just said, you're wrong. He apparently also mimicked your voice when doing it. But let me ask you this. When you read something like this, and you can't even agree on the same set of facts, do you trust the president as a negotiator?
You've mentioned that my father was Prime Minister. I was raised in a political family. I understand how people say things and people tell stories and people approach things. My approach with this president from the very beginning has been, I'm going to focus on what we do and where we go. And quite frankly, a year ago when I talked with the president about the possibility of 232 tariffs on steel and aluminum, he agreed that it would be insulting to consider Canada as part of the national security concerns. So for me, that really doesn't make sense.
You brought up you're hosting the G7 meeting next week. Is it the G6+1 when it comes to issues like climate change, the Iran deal, meaning that, or do you think you can get consensus between all 7 Western economies?
I think there's a lot of things we will get consensus on, and I think there's some things, you're right, climate change, trade, where it's going to be more difficult to get consensus on, but one of the advantages of this gathering of the world's advanced industrial economies is that we get to talk about things where we agree on and take action, and things that we don't agree on and have it out in a real and direct conversation. I think that's of value to all of us, and like I said, we agree on the need to make our middle classes grow, and that's one of the things we're going to be spending a lot of time on.
What's the view of American leadership from your perspective and from the other Western allies? I mean, obviously, Canada's Western allies and America's Western allies overlap. What are they saying about American leadership these days?
Well, we've seen the president step away from some of the traditional roles that the U.S. has had, whether it's...
Does that concern you?
Every era comes with its own challenges, and I think one of the things that Canada's been able to do over the past couple of years is step up a little bit in multilateral fora, in being a convener around important value-based issues that has been less a priority for this current administration. But my perspective on that is not what matters. I mean, my perspective is, as Canadian Prime Minister, I will work with whomever the U.S. people elect, and I will have a constructive, positive relationship with them, and I will clearly and consistently stand up for Canadian interests.
Let me flip it the other way then. If President Trump asked you, it's like, okay, I know my personal relationships with Angela Merkel and perhaps with Theresa May aren't as good as they could be. What could I do to fix that? What is their biggest concerns? What would you tell them?
I think their concerns are around this idea that trade between allies and friendly nations is somehow a zero-sum game. That for someone to win, someone else has to lose. And what we've seen over the past years of growth and of benefits to our economies is that we do better when we work together. Now, we do have challenges about making sure that everyone is feeling the benefits of our growth, and that's what we're focusing on here in Canada, and that's part of what the president got elected on in his Make America Great Again, and fold in those people who feel left out. He and I disagree on the measures to do it. I think the measures he's taking right now are actually going to hurt American workers and hurt the very people who are looking to him to help him. And that's really one of the reasons I'm here talking to you today.
One of the members of the president's own party have criticized him by saying, hey, you're treating Canada the same way you're treating China. Be tough on China. Don't treat Canada the same way you treat China. Is that essentially what you're trying to tell the president?
You're making it sort of like a schoolyard, don't be mean to me, be mean to them. No, it's not about, treating someone nicely or poorly. It's about thinking about the impact the choices have on your citizens and on your allies' citizens. It doesn't have to be win-lose. It can be win-win, and that's what the Canada-U.S. friendship has demonstrated for decades, if not generations, and that's exactly where we should be moving forward together.
You're going to get some personal time with him next week. What do you hope to accomplish?
Have a frank conversation about where we can work together to grow our economies, to help Canadian workers and American workers who are working in the same way to build a better future for their families.
I want to ask you one final question. There's a new book out by a longtime aide of former President Obama, Ben Rhodes, and he writes this in the book. He said, Obama, not usually an outwardly sentimental man, attempted to pass a torch of sorts, and he refers to a meeting that he had with you. Justin, your voice is going to be needed more, he said, leaning forward and putting his elbows on his knees. You're going to have to speak out when certain values are threatened. You brought this up a little bit, that you feel as if that you're going to step up in certain ways. What did you interpret what President Obama was trying to pass to you?
What I took from it was something that was deeply reassuring and something I've seen all around the world where Canadians are. People recognize that Canadians, when we show up either as troops on the ground in a peacekeeping mission or as aid workers or as bureaucrats trying to rebuild an economy or help a multilateral institution, Canadians are there to help. We are thoughtful, we are engaged, we are polite, we are welcoming, but we're also firm about our values. We fought like lions on the beaches of World War II and in the trenches of World War I. We step up when we need to. We're going to be polite, but we're also not going to be pushed around. And that need to be firm about projecting our values and defending not just our citizens, but citizens around the world in positive ways is what I consider the responsibility we have as Canadians and what I'll do as leader.
What values are you most concerned about that we might be losing?
I think we're seeing a polarization in discourse where people aren't listening to each other, where we're not actually listening to people with different perspectives or different positions than we do.
Are we exporting this to Canada? Is this one of our exports? Are we exporting polarization to Canada?
I think this has been something that has been in all discourses around politics for a long time. I think it gets exacerbated when there is economic anxiety and people go tribal almost, and they close in to their own identity, whether it's cultural or economic or personal. And we need to do a better job of actually listening to other perspectives, allowing ourselves to grow, and hopefully finding common ground.
Do you understand why do you have an idea of why the president seems to personalize the relationship with you so much?
Because international relations often do come down to interpersonal relationships, and I've been very deliberate in my approach to have a good relationship with the president on an individual and a personal level, but always understanding that the relationship between a prime minister and a president is just one piece of an incredibly deep relationship between Canadians and Americans that we are custodians of, but that we don't ultimately shape as much as Canadians and Americans themselves do.
So you feel like you can establish trust even if maybe he's skeptical of your politics and you may be skeptical of his politics. Do you feel like you can establish a trust?
We find areas of common ground, and the fact that Canada and the United States will always succeed better when we're together than when we are divided means that I am confident that eventually we will continue to work together despite this challenge.
Mr. Prime Minister, one export that we're excited about in Washington, D.C. is perhaps having Lord Stanley's Cup.
Yeah,
actually show up in Washington. Hey, we've never had it.
My beloved Habs have been a long time since the Montreal Canadiens won a cup.
We just want to see it once. That's all we're asking for. Mr. Prime Minister, thank you for your time.
Real pleasure.
You got it.
Thank you, Chuck.